Our specific approach, which I will talk to about now, is in hospitality. So I'm an architect, and my colleagues are as well. But we found the space of hospitality fascinating because we could explore these thoughts around human behavior quite effectively and experiment through 30 years to try and see what worked and what didn't work. And believe me, we made a lot of mistakes. But there's the 5 senses, of course, that we need to be quite mindful of. And you all know about that, and I'm going to touch on that very briefly. And then there are 8 rules that we apply when we say that we need to create spaces for this kind of joy and to consistent quality and we measure it by 2 things only, really, and that's dwell time and footfall. So if you can get more people to visit the space and stay longer, it means that their response to it is positive. So we've always really approached this kind of design thinking as framing for these behaviors. So this is something we just completed. I'm not going to talk about our work tonight, and we'll do another talk about that at some point. And I just put the slide up here because there's stuff that I'm going to reference to, like storytelling, the use of color, and so forth. And this particular restaurant, just by example, it's done for a client that gives us a tremendous amount of work, Bradley Michael. And the result of this design was they have a chain of these restaurants called the Meat and Wine, but they're open for 5 days a week. But this is so successful that they're open for 7 days a week because of that demand. So we've managed to get a lot of things right in this one, and now the pressure is on for this client to get them right every single time. And of course, that is something to live up to. So the 5 guiding senses, again, I'm just going to touch very briefly because you're all aware of this, and sight being the first one, and that's the most prominent one. It's by which we gather information. Color is the most powerful tool, of course, to impact the behavior. And specifically in our place, our space that we operate in, where we look at kind of really creating joy. I'm going to touch on 3 quickly: red, orange, and yellow. And red's really that kind of reptilian carryover of densely rich, sugar-packed fruits. It is said that, and we often argue the point, and that's a conversation for another day, that it's believed that the faster the food, the more the red in the space should be. Yes and no. We'll unpack that another day. Orange is a color that gives us kind of sense of calm and comfort and warmth. So we use a lot of that, or variants of that, like autumny colors. And then yellow, in anticipation of the food coming, serotonin. So those are all colors that work quite well in our specific space. I'm not going to discuss the rest, green, blue, and all those. And then we have lighting. Circadian lighting is important, that lives and drives according to the biorhythms. And specifically, we are aggressive in our insistence that lights in front of house in hospitality should never be more than 2,700 kelvins. It's a very warm light, and the light used, and it's so subtle, and we'll talk about invisible design a fraction later, that you don't actually notice it. So it's important because the light bounces off tables, it reflects into your face as opposed to highlighting it. And then within that, you appear more attractive, you look better, and people around you look better, and so forth. When you look better, you feel better, and the conversation is just a whole different kind of conversation. People tend to stay longer. So it really impacts our mood. The Lombard effect, this is something according to, I put this in here because it really addresses sound. Sound in restaurants are important. So besides music, people fret too much about the music. It's really something that sits in the background. Acoustics are critical, and we tend to get that, or one struggles to get that exactly right, but it needs to be exactly right. Because a restaurant space, for people to have joy in a restaurant space, they go there to socialize. They don't go there to eat. Despite what you may say, people don't go to restaurants to eat. In fact, studies are done that you don't remember food. You don't remember you remember food, but you don't remember taste. You remember the total experience. And because of that, you think that the food that you had was great, but you don't remember the taste. And so the acoustics, the Lombard effect is when the acoustics are not balanced and people start talking louder to hear each other, and that creates a repetition of everybody talking louder, and in the end, it's just a noise. And so that's the second biggest complaint after service. In a restaurant, what you want to do is have it just enough so you can hear now and then a little word from somebody else, but not the total sentence. Because we want to socialize. We go there to socialize. So it's to overhear a little bit, but not entirely. So getting that balance is critical. And then touching on smell. So there's a fragrance wheel. So the five senses through thousands of years. So we've had smell at some point was a lot better developed, and we've kind of tended to kind of lose a bit of that through time. So it's really the olfactory neurons that pick it up through the olfactory bulb, and then the limbic system. And smell is the most powerful way to trigger a memory. And if the memory and a smell is great, we just assimilate to the space a whole lot better. So apart from the theater, you see open kitchens, and apart from the theater that this creates, it's a way for the smell to travel through the space. And if you can't succeed in having the smell travel through the space, you have to pump it in. You have to use scents of kinds in the darker, deeper places. Because the right kind of smell can increase turnover by up to 300%. Now that's massive. Of course, and dwell time by 16%. So 16% in dwell time, the longer, and that's true for banks, and that's true for any retail, really. The longer you stay, the more you buy, and banks sell products too. And touch, this is not thought about often enough, but it has a subconscious effect. So, and that's important in our specific areas, right from the front door, when you open a door, when the door's closed. And you don't touch anything further until you sit down. But then it's the weight of the chair, it's the texture of that chair, it's the texture of the table, it's the weight of the menu and the texture of the menu and the cutlery and the crockery. All of that's critical. So COVID-19 is another story, and I'm sure many people have spoken about that. So we're saying that we need to move away from touch in restaurants, that they are important in those areas. We'll obviously always touch. And it is so, there was a fantastic study done by a guy, Filippo Marinetti. And he encouraged patrons to wear pajamas. And those pajamas to be covered in either sandpaper or cork or felt and all kinds of interesting materials. And to eat with their hands so they could really experience touch. And if anybody can guess when this was, Adrian's going to hand a bottle of, I don't know what that is, champers or... When just guess a time. Adrian, guys, you're not allowed to... Rob? No, don't speak up. Anybody, just give a date. Who said that? He says you're 7 years out. That's close enough. You can have it.
I think he was already born this night.
That's phenomenal, and that's great that you got that. I mean, you think that was recent,
So was it 7 years earlier or 7 years
later, 1909, yeah. Sorry, 6. And taste, now, that's not something we can control. That's a passport factor. If your client can't produce great food, they shouldn't be in the restaurant game. But we've placed this at number 5 because it is the least important. When I say the least important, people are over kind of emphasizes and over... The factor of importance is not that high. Food needs to be good always and not great sometimes, because great means at some point it's going to be not so great and you will pick it up and be disappointed. So if you want to have a continuous joyful experience in a restaurant, it's important for the restaurateur, and that's why I have a specific, and we have a specific problem when people chase hats and so forth, because it places too much emphasis on the food. And many people will disagree, but if you can do good food always and have a great environment that you can control, it's a completely controllable environment, people will always have a great experience.